Okay, everybody, welcome. Welcome very much to, I believe this is, I can't believe it's episode 17, maybe? This is crazy, of our interviews with the pros, as I've mentioned before. Eric and I started this stuff after Whiskey Week was canceled in Chicago due to COVID. And about every 2 weeks, we've been interviewing a different pro from the industry. And tonight, we really do have a very special guest. We have Sam Filmus from Impex Beverages. And Sam, what I'd like to ask you first, before we even really get started here, is what are you drinking tonight and why?
Oh, I was prepared for this question because it looks like this is the question you start your show with. So here's what I'm drinking tonight. It's Glenglassaugh Evolution.
Okay, so tell me about it. What exactly is it?
Well, the distillery has been, they opened in mid-80s, 1857, I believe. And then at some point it was closed for 20 years. So it was silent for 20 years. And then Stuart Nickerson, who you probably know, the name is familiar. He used to be a Highland Park manager, and his name was already pretty famous in the industry. He decided to reanimate the distillery, and he basically, started with Glenglassaugh Revival, I believe, and then Evolution, and then the series. So this particular one, I like it. It's matured in Tennessee bourbon casks, and also it is bottled at cask strength 57.2.
Oh, very nice. So do you add water to that, or are you drinking it neat?
I started drinking it neat, but then I thought we had a long evening, and I started adding some.
Smart man. So I'm actually drinking right now my very first dram of M&H Elements. Okay, M&H Elements. Okay, very good. So it's my first dram of this. I've had other M&H expressions. Can you tell me M&H Elements? Tell me about it.
Okay, so M&H is a pretty young distillery out of Tel Aviv, Israel. They started a few years ago. Due to the hot climate, the maturation goes very fast, and they have several places where they mature their whiskeys. One of them is Dead Sea level, which is hottest spot, and they actually lose so much of angel share by Dead Sea maturation that they have to take the barrels back to their Tel Aviv warehouse, as the angel share goes to 25% every year.
Oh,
so
wow,
they come
that
back
high.
Yeah,
Wow.
in 4 years you would get an empty cask. Yeah.
Right.
So they started with two expressions that called whiskey in bloom, and that's something that we had to go through with TTB, because the first question was, when we applied for the labels, how much of milk and how much of honey is in this whiskey? Then back and forth laboratory. Then they didn't like, because it was called young whiskey. Well, how young? Give us the age. At that time, it was 12 months old.
Yeah, we see it right there. Yeah, Brian's holding them up.
So by the time we bottled it, it was 24 months old. But that's how long it took us with TTB to get the labels and to change the name from young whiskey to whiskey in bloom. And it was Joshua's idea, Joshua Haddon's idea.
Smart guy.
It was one release for the US. That's it. So if you find those bottles, it'll be kind of collectible.
Right.
And
so
then
the Elements, though, Elements is aged in sherry, right?
Yeah, so its initial aging comes from bourbon casks, but then it's finished in the ex-sherry cask. But what's important and kind of significant about this particular expression is the fact that, as you know, all the products that comes from M&H Distillery, they're kosher.
Right.
And, red wine and kosher doesn't kind of, so they had to go to Bodega, Spain, South Spain, Jerez, and actually start doing their own kosher sherry wine.
Oh.
So they not only have the first and probably the only sherry cask expression of single malt that is kosher, but they actually are able to control from day one how this wine is made, how long it's been in the cask. Is the cask ready to be moved to the distillery and the new make to start aging there. So it's, besides the fact that it's great tasting whiskey, it's just the fact how unique it is.
Yeah, it's delicious. So how long was this in the bourbon cask, and then how long in the sherry cask?
They usually go from 2 years and 2.5 years in bourbon cask, and then they finish about 6 months in the sherry cask.
Okay.
It all depends. They're so small, they're able to go on a weekly basis and kind of taste it and see where the balance is, because they didn't want, the sherry cask to overpower the original taste of whiskey DNA. So it's an interesting thing, and it varies from batch to batch.
It's delicious. I'm really enjoying it. It's funny. You're telling the story about the angel share and how much evaporates every year, and it reminds me of when I first learned about Amrut, from India. Talking to Raj, with Amrut, and how they were getting. I think they were getting something like 12 to 14% every year. And so you hear you're talking 25%. That must be very challenging to manage the process, so that it still stays to be a good whiskey.
Exactly. And Amrut is a good example, Gail, because it's the same, basically, temperature, climatic conditions. And M&H is losing about 10 to 12, sometimes to 15% in their Tel Aviv warehouse. And then they have another warehouse in some other area where the winters are pretty cold and the summers are pretty hot. That creates a different style. And that's challenging, because they still want to keep this DNA of M&H,
Right.
but give people different choices, different varietals of tastes. And that's
Right.
what these guys do. They do a great job. I mean,
That's wonderful.
like, they would not call whiskey before it becomes 3 years old. In Israel,
Right.
you can call whiskey when it touches the wood, but they wanted to kind of follow the Scotch making tradition of respecting how whiskey needs to be done.
Oh, right. And what people in the global, marketplace, what they expect. They don't want something that's that young typically, even though it could still be good, but they want to know that there's been some time and effort put into it. So you mentioned here, we've talked about milk and honey and stuff that M&H does. You have a rather wide range of distilleries that you work with, okay? And some of the other bottles I have here, I also have Kilchoman Maher Bay, okay, which is excellent. And I have another bottle here that Michael Nolan introduced to me, the Portiskeag 10th anniversary, which is just amazing stuff, absolutely amazing. Can you tell us what goes into the process of selecting a distillery that you are going to distribute? There's so many distilleries in the world. You have a great lineup. How did you build that lineup? How do you decide who goes into that lineup?
Well, it's a great question, Gil, and I apologize in advance if the answer is too long, but I'll try to be as short as possible. When I consider to bring the brand to the portfolio, first thing, I put myself in my sales rep's shoes, because the rep goes to the store, to the decision maker, to the buyer, and presents something. And if he comes with a bag full of bottles and he pulls out a vanilla vodka or some Sauvignon Blanc or whatever, the buyer would say, you know what, my goal is for that rep to pull out something that would excite the buyer. The buyer knows that Impex rep or my distribution company, JVS rep, comes in and he would wow the buyer with something. Whether they take it or not, but I want them to be wowed. And that's how our selection process goes. We get a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails to bring this, to bring that. I'll be very honest, we're very selective. I still want to maintain the portfolio small, manageable, so every brand has its good attention, good chunk of time put in. And another thing that my criteria is, we started as a single malt Scotch whiskey company or Scotch whiskey company. We did have blend. But then in about 5 years, I walk in the store and I see, instead of huge, line of single malt Scotch offerings, it's getting shrunk by, bourbons from this side and American whiskey from and world whiskey from this side. And the space is the space. They can't make it more. It just go like this. I call it harmonica, not my way, but it's harmonica. Anyways, so I started looking for some world whiskey. So that's how we ended up of, people from Wales approached us, the Penderyn Distillery. We brought it in. It was crazy of me, but, because Sazerac used to carry it and, they didn't make it. They were too big for this brand, or this brand was too small for them. Then M&H, then Belgian whiskey, and et cetera, et cetera. So the third criteria, and I'm sorry, again, it's a long answer probably, is, like, for example, we have Islay as a Scotch. Now we have Speyside, Glenallachie. Now we have some, independent bottles from different regions of Scotland to give the customer the opportunity to experience, to tour Scotland right here at home. So basically, that's another criteria that we're kind of.
No, that's good. No, I like that. That makes a lot of sense too, because when you have multiple regions that you can offer to the buyers, you're not necessarily going to be one-stop shopping, but you can sure help them, build their lineup. And it's interesting what you mentioned about shelf space. So a few weeks ago we interviewed Alison Park from Bren, and I went to the Big Binny's in Lincoln Park, to buy a bottle of Bren, because I always buy a bottle of whomever. I try to buy at least one or two bottles of whomever it is that we're interviewing. I think that my wife, by the way, has figured out my method here of building my collection. That I have sort of a, competing, goals here while I'm doing this. It's wonderful. I have multiple goals, but the whole concept of shelf space, and when I was looking for Bren, and I had to look around for the world whiskey section, and right next to Bren was Milk and Honey. And then again, it's like, you have this world whiskey section, and you're right, it's growing, but obviously over the last several years, the largest growing section has been the American whiskey section. The number of ryes and bourbons and American single malts has been growing dramatically. And that leads me to my next question. Right now, I believe that all of your offerings come from overseas. Do you have any plans to offer anything from any distilleries here in the United States, and why or why not?
Well, as we mentioned, and you're right, the bourbon, the American whiskey segment grows rapidly and, in a very high scale. And for me to dive into this ocean of competition, I have to think, because I want to be a winner. I don't want to copy someone. I want to be unique. Not better, but unique. And we tried one American whiskey that was about 5-6 years ago, called West Wind Whiskey, WWW. And it was a whiskey, now I can say from where it was from, Corsair. And it was, they used to have the whiskey called Greniac, and that we disclosed, we wanted to be as transparent as possible. So we said, it's a whiskey that has 9 grains, which at that time, I don't know, maybe now more distillers, but at that time, Corsair was the one. So it's kind of, we were saying that without saying that. We sold it, but I didn't feel that was a Kilchoman for me. It was not Penderyn for me. It was not Milk and Honey for me. So for now, if I say we don't have any plans, I would be lying to you, but we don't have any plans for the near future. We do have some plans on bringing mezcals. And some
Mezcals, interesting.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that, because I know that Joshua and Jason have done some interesting things with getting spirits that have been aged in mezcal casks, if I remember correctly. So talk to me a little bit about that market and what exactly you're looking at with respect to mezcal.
Well, it's another weird category that people think, Sam, what are you doing? But, I do run a distribution company here that I've been doing that for the last 25 years in California. And that's where mezcal world was open to me. I want to confess that I have people, and I'm lucky to have people that are much more better experts than I am. You talk to Joshua Hatton, he's a great expert in single malt, Scotch world, much better expert than I am. I have Chris, who is my partner. He used to work for me. Now he's my partner. He's a big expert in Japanese whiskeys. I have the guy who runs my Northern California division, sales division in my distribution company, Robert Horton, who is a huge expert in mezcal. And, I wouldn't say 1 week would pass by for the last couple of years where he wouldn't ask me, Sam, you're losing a lot of opportunities. You have me, and you have a great category that now is booming. When the travel was permitted, I would go to a lot of distributors to see how they do with our products. And I would always ask about mezcal, and most of people say, haven't heard of it. Some of them would say it's smoked tequila. But there was a few, like New York, that was like, oh, it's booming for us. So basically, yeah, that's another thing I want to say, that I'm opening my own brand because throughout these years of being in business, we were losing brands migrate here and there, we get some new brands, and we lose some existing brands. So I decided about a year ago to start my own brand, which is going to be called the Impex Collection.
Oh, nice.
We already have 6 casks that we selected, including 25 years old Springbank.
25-year-old Springbank?
Yeah.
I love Springbank. Springbank's amazing.
Single cask strength, finish in the sherry cask. I've got 40 years old blend that is sherry cask mature, 28 years old. Cameron Bridge. But also, the next edition of this would be mezcal. Mezcal, small batches, mezcal, very unique. And we brought 10 casks of rum from Jamaica, from Long Pond, and another distillery that we're going to be bottling under this, brand called the Impex Collection. So my reps who are here, you're not going to be bored. You will have some other Sauvignon Blanc to sell. I can guarantee that.
That's wonderful. So, you brought up something that I wasn't going to ask you, but I am very interested in this. During the lockdown, okay, so everything pretty much locked down, sometime in March. What has been selling the best? I'm really curious about this because I know that sales of liquor for the most part have been very, very strong. We like to joke around here that Binny's is sort of like Disney World right now because, it's where everybody wants to go. What is selling the best, in the world of liquor? What's doing the best right now?
Sure. So I want to start with the fact that we didn't lay anyone off during the COVID. All my reps have the same, coverage and et cetera, which I'm proud of saying that because I think it's important. They need to pay their rent, their mortgage, the kids, and et cetera. So that was,
Cheers.
Thank you. That was my goal number one. And also, surprisingly enough, we had some increases in sales, especially in the retail sector. On-prem, I was hurt more by JVS because we have about 20% of our product is, for the cocktails for the restaurants and bars, which we got hit hard.
Right.
But luckily, the Impex portfolio is not designed for on-prem, or if it's designed, it's a very small percentage of it. So we it's difficult to say we took advantage of the, COVID, but we were able to.
Like it's business. You're not taking advantage. If you have a product that people want at a price that they want, that's not taking advantage of the market. There's a lot that they can buy. And you don't have to apologize for doing well at a time when other people are struggling. If you're doing well, you're doing well. There's a reason for it.
Yeah, so as for category, your question, I think Japanese whiskeys did great. Kilchoman, we actually up 4%, but I'm trying not to look at the numbers before the year end, but I had to because I just received the depletion report. So we're 2% up in sales and 4% up in purchases, which makes our Kilchoman suppliers very happy.
Right.
Goes 4, it's like 40 in non-COVID times. So they're happy, we're happy. And I want to thank all my reps for working so hard to make this happen. Golden Corrales went down, but I think I know why, because we just have one SKU.
Okay.
And Baden stayed flat. So it was kind of equally, proportionally equal.
Got it. Now, you mentioned the Japanese whiskeys. I find the Japanese whiskey market to be fascinating. They were doing so well for so long, and then all of a sudden, prices got bid up so high, and then they started running out of supply. It's a fascinating market. Can you tell us a little bit about your Japanese offering and a little bit about the Japanese market?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Probably about 7, 8 years ago, I walk into the store and would see, stacks of Yamazaki 18 for $69.99. No one cared. But then somebody, we're not going to say, his name out loud, gave Yamazaki 18 best whiskey in the world. And, I'm a whiskey collector. I have 2 bottles of Karizawa distillery, which is a closed distillery in Japan. And one of the reasons it was closed because people in Japan, like bartenders or just regular consumer, were not supporting Japanese whiskeys. They were more like scotch. And that forced this distillery, another distillery, to close down. The bottle of 31 years old Karizawa I have now probably worth $15,000 or more. Just
wow,
really. So
what do you have? Well, what's your offering of Japanese?
We have 3 Japanese whiskeys, so 3 Japanese whiskey brands. One is called Oishi, another one Fukano. Both are rice whiskey, and both are located close to each other in Kumamoto Prefecture, South Japan.
All right, Melissa's holding them up right now. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you, Melissa. Yep. And then we have a brand called Matsui, and Matsui has their own made by them whiskey called, there's 3, Matsui Sakura, Matsui Mizunara, and Matsui Peated. They also have blended malts that are, made from sourced whiskeys. We never hide it. It's on our website. We always start our conversation with it because it's a very touchy topic nowadays.
The whole concept, right? We've spoken here about the concept of sourcing and how, for the most part, to the consumer, as long as the consumer knows what is being purchased, they're okay with it. It's when it's being hidden that it's a problem. So I was actually at a Matsui tasting at Delilah's about a year ago. There was a Matsui. There was somebody, I don't remember who it was exactly, but there was somebody at Delilah's at a table where he was pouring a bunch of Matsui stuff, and it was a wonderful evening. It was good stuff.
Yeah, we're very transparent. I believe in this because you can't fool people. It's just.
And Brian's holding up some bottles there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry,
nice.
So this is Matsui Sakura.
Oh, it's a gorgeous bottle. It's beautiful.
So this is bottled at 48% non-chill filtered, natural color. And, it's this distillery has been running since 1910. But, they have blended whiskey, which is Totori, which is a blend of malt and grain. They have blended malt, which is all single malt, but from different distilleries, Kariyoshi.
Okay.
And they have their own. So while they're building their own kind of reputation and making their whiskey and aging it as under Matsui, they just sell other whiskeys without hiding the fact that this is a source of whiskey.
Got it. So I want to change. I want to change directions here a little bit. You are our 4th interviewee who is a keeper of the Quake. Okay, we've had, so Joshua Hatton obviously is a keeper of the Quake. Brett Pantani. Okay, we had Brett. Obviously, I've known Brett for over 20 years. Joshua Hatton, obviously, and you are a keeper of the Quake. Can you tell us a little bit about what that meant to you when you got that award, when you were honored in such a way by your peers?
Sure. So I was approached a couple of times, and I would say I will never be a keeper because I have to wear the kilt. It's just. And then there was a group of people, including your favorite characters. Michael Nolan probably might know these guys. Joshua Hatton, Jason Johnston Yelling, and another guy from Canada. So I got a phone call from Joshua. He goes, since Impex is on its rise, and it's like, what do you think about having a few members of the team being keepers? I say, well, Joshua, it's great. I mean, this is going to bring us even on an upper kind of a, sorry about that, 1 second.
That's okay.
Bring
Did we
us
lose? There you are.
upper shelf. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. It's okay.
So he goes, yeah, but you're one of these people. I said, hold on a second. Can you repeat your question? Because he goes, you better just say yes or no, because so I called my wife. My wife was the one that would push me to become one. And I said, well, here's an opportunity. Well, she goes, if you want to come home and sleep home at night, not looking for a shelter, you better say yes. She was so
Good
almost,
woman. Good
yeah,
for her. Good for her.
Divorce. So that's how it started. And then the reason I decided to drink on glass because one of the people who nominated me was Stuart Nickerson.
Okay.
And then another one was Michael Urquhart, which is he's retired now, but he's a master. You got about a little bit more than 2,100 keepers, but there's 10 masters, and one of them is Michael. Mm-hmm. He's the guy with Gordon MacPhail and Ben Romach.
Okay.
Greatest gentleman that ever seen. And so that's how it happened. But what made it, significant for me is the fact that my daughter came with me for this banquet.
Oh, that's nice.
So that was very remarkable and touching.
That's really nice. That's really Monique told us a story that they surprised her. She didn't know she was getting to be the keeper, and they totally surprised her. She thought she was somebody's guest, and when all of a sudden she realized that she was getting the award, she said she completely burst out in tears, and that Brett Pontani also burst out in tears because it turns out that Brett just starts crying at the drop of a hat. It's just what he does. And it was a really funny story to hear how it all happened. I do want to ask you a question about COVID and your business. Obviously your sales reps who are on here, your regional reps, they can't meet us one-on-one. It seems like you guys have developed a really good social media presence. Okay, you're doing a lot of interviews, with the distillery masters and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about how you developed that strategy? Because it seems like you really worked quickly to get out there on social media.
Sure. So, nowadays without social media, I can't even, I think I wouldn't have not had my Facebook if it was not for my business, but it's so necessary right now, so essential. And Melissa will agree with me because we had a few discussions about this. But I think it's almost essential for the business nowadays to have, nice website, Facebook, Instagram account, and etc. As to pandemic, I went back, like we went to Scotland on the 19th of February because there was a big opening of Kilchoman Visitor Center and their new extension of their stills. And then we went to a few more countries, and by the time we came back, the pandemic actually, people started talking about the pandemic. There was late February or beginning of March. And I went to my earliest emails, and I found one that I sent to my guys saying, let's get on Zoom. I never knew what Zoom was, right. But now I can't imagine my life without it. We have, my reps probably hate me as so many Zooms we have, sometimes a week, sometimes a day. And Brian actually the champion of attending this. It got to the point when my JVS reps would ask me, please invite Brian to our Zoom events because he's so, funny and great questions and so. But also we're very lucky with our suppliers because every and each supplier, and it's in time. James Wills, Anthony's son, he's got a kid of 1 month old, and he did 1:30 a.m. talking to us, talking to our distributors, talking to the consumers and etc. By the way, we need to talk about inviting one of them to your show, by the way.
Okay.
Same thing with the guy with M&H. It's 7-hour difference, and
Yeah, right. That's
postures.
difficult. Yeah, that's very challenging because actually, without you might notice we're doing this at 7 p.m. Chicago time. All right. Obviously, I can't do this for M&H. My daughter, by the way, is right outside of Tel Aviv right now. She's on a kibbutz right outside of Tel Aviv. She's been there for a long time, and she's going to be there for a long time. The time difference is, most of the people whom we have on here, a lot of us have jobs, we work, some of them have kids, families. It's difficult to find the time to do it. And for instance, the Drammers event I was just on, Dr. Bill was on there. It started at 4:00, Chicago time, which was, I think, already 10 o'clock, in the UK. And, by the time we're done, it's already going to be, it's going to be after midnight there. So, that whole thing is very challenging, but, you're right. Zoom has made a huge difference. I can't imagine, what this would have been like for all of us without the ability to communicate this way. And some companies like yours have done a really good job of, getting out there and being in front of everybody. I'm going to ask you one more question before I open it up to others. Very quickly, do you have anything to say specifically about the tariffs and how tariffs have affected your different distilleries?
Well, for the last year, probably, when it started October 18th of 2019. I wake up every day and I look at the news from Mark Brown or from Market Watch or whatever, and the first thing I'm kind of praying not to see is the tariffs go up. It just became part of my life. When it happened, I was able, because the talks started few weeks ago, maybe a month before it happened. So I was able to say, hell with it. I'm going to just bring everything that my suppliers have now at their warehouses ready to be dispatched. I ended up having 18 pallets coming through via air and 3 or 4 containers via water. And we pre-paid our excise tax, so it won't.
Okay, nice.
Affect. So, and then the COVID.
Right.
But
yeah, it was a double whammy. I mean, it was an incredible double whammy. I can't even imagine, the decisions that have to be made, because obviously some distilleries have passed on the costs to the consumer. Others have decided to eat it, and others have decided to split it. There's no one right way to handle it. Do you have any influence on how your different distilleries are handling the tariffs, or do they make those decisions themselves?
Sure. So thank God it didn't affect blended whiskey. It didn't affect Welsh whiskey or Belgian whiskey, etc. Israeli whiskey. So we're talking about single malts from Scotland, Scotch single malt.
Right.
And the first, distillery that approached me by this idea was Anthony Wills from Kilchoman. He called me, and he said, "Look, we're in the same boat, Sam. What are you going to do?" Anthony, I don't know, but at the same time, the containers coming in. Robert, who is I mentioned it before, he comes to the warehouse and, COVID started and this containers coming in and he goes like, "Sam, what were you doing? Like, what are you doing?" He goes, "You're crazy, but I like it." That's basically, and I didn't know how to answer. I didn't know what I was doing. Right. But Anthony was gentleman enough saying, "Look, let's just split it 50-50, 12.5% from you, 12%. And I said, "You know what? That's fair."
Yeah.
And, after that, I was interviewed by Market Watch, and they loved this story so much. And I can tell you, the sales for Kilchoman went up crazy. I had one person who would say, "Oh, you probably were making a lot of money before if you're able to afford to." And I said, "That's fine. That's all good."
Yeah, that's not really how business works. And it's funny. I'm a financial advisor, and so I watch Market Watch like crazy. I have trouble sleeping sometimes given what's been going on lately. But it really is fascinating how political decisions affect our businesses. And these are things that we just have to be able to adjust to. And I'm sure you and I could both go on for a long time, but out of respect for everybody else here, first, Eric, do you have any specific question that you would like to ask Sam?
Sure. I wanted to find out how has COVID affected, I mean, I'm assuming before coronavirus, you would be flying out often to visit the distilleries. How has COVID affected your ability or your ability to communicate with all your distilleries?
Thanks, Eric. That's a great question. Number one, I think if we're talking about the most beautiful part of being in this business is to see people, to talk to people, to visit the distilleries, to share the dram. I mean, this is part as, you know, as to why we all are in this business. So this was taken away from us. It was a big hit. Yes, Zoom. Yes, you know, few events started coming up, and I always tell my guys, you don't have to go. It's your choice. The only one that I say no to is Brian, and he hates me for that, but that's okay. We're all waiting for this day, Eric, to come when we're all together again.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
It did affect, you know, mentally, morale-wise. It did, yes.
Great question, Eric. So why don't we do this now? Why don't we open it up to questions? If anybody has a question, sort of like raise your hand and unmute yourself. I see Nolan. Nolan, why don't you go for it?
Sam, you've been working with Ollie Chilton for obviously several years with Port Ascay. What did it take to talk him into bringing in this single malts of Scotland line? Because I'll offer opinion after your answer.
Sure, you probably can't forget this Glenbergie, 1999, 21 years old, Michael.
That was the opinion I was going to offer. I was going to say that this was the best damn whiskey. This is the second bottle. I opened this one on Sunday.
But that's the one we tasted on Sunday, right, Michael? You poured that for me on Sunday. Oh,
yeah,
that's good. That's so
a lot
good.
of it for myself too, but this is the second bottle of this I'm going through. So it's by far, I think, one of the best whiskeys I've had this year.
Thank you, Michael. By the way, for those who don't know Michael, he's a great guy. I don't remember one time when I came to Chicago, we didn't meet. And you know, for me, Chicago and Michael is Michael in Chicago and some other fellows. But, you know, one day when my daughter was moving from one apartment to another one, I had some whiskeys there and I didn't know what to do with them. And I said, Michael, can you come and load your truck with the whiskeys? And we had some good times, Fountain Head and etc. But I want to thank you for your support because you always, you know, I know it probably Josh was, you know, created, but I want to just kind of be right next to him saying how much we enjoy your support and your loyalty. And you just don't come and get drunk, you buy bottles, and it just means a lot to us. So it's great.
Well,
Ollie Chilton. Just getting to your question, sorry about that. You know, we started with Porter's Cake, and the way that it works, the Kinder Singh was looking for a U.S. importer of this brand. He was never here, and there was a lot of people who would, you know, buy it from Whiskey Exchange. And he said, why not having it here so people can come to the stores and buy it from here? And we got approached. I think they called Kilhoman and they called David Stirk to kind of get the reference on us. And at that time we lost Smokehead, so I thought it was great to have a, you know, independent bottle of Islay whiskey. Everything comes from Islay under this label. And since that, we couldn't be happier. And then when I took the whole team to the, you know, to their headquarters in London, Sukhinder Singh came and said thank you, and he showed us his beautiful room of whiskeys. He's a huge collector, probably top 3 collectors in the world. And based on our performance at Porter's Cake, they offered us single malts of Scotland.
Very nice, very nice.
I was going to say that line was. There's not a bad whiskey in that. It was an incredible release. It was really, really impressive.
Yeah. By the way, Michael, this Port of Skeg that you poured for me at your fundraiser for your synagogue last year, the 10th anniversary. That is just glorious stuff. It's wonderful. I saw that Robert had his hand up before. Robert, if you could unmute and ask your question, please.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm curious. Were you confident in the beginning that you would have success with all of these world brands? Because I think, you know, I'm friends with quite a few importers, and I just think that a lot of these brands would have been turned down out of fear of, you know, not being well known and being from countries that traditionally, you know, people who are not super educated in the industry don't really have any mindset that they're gonna have good whiskey from places like Wales and Israel. And so were you confident before you even started bringing those, or was it something that you wanted to try and test it and build it? And that's really kind of my question on it.
As you noticed, I had to pour a whiskey before answering the question, and I put Pandarian probably for the reason. Thank you for the question, Robert. I am a challenger. I'm a player. I don't go somebody's way following. I want to see how I can get and achieve what I want to achieve. You know, I mentioned that Pandarian was imported to the U.S. by Sazerac. Sazerac is a huge company. They own Buffalo Trace. They own a lot of brands. And, you know, seeing this brand didn't survive under Sazerac house, you know, that has, you know, 200 people in the state on, you know, on the ground. It was risky, but that's, you know, that's the challenge. I wanted to see if I can make it. And same thing with Israel. When Gal Granov called Joshua saying we're looking for, or the distillery that does things right, looking for some good partner in US. Joshua called me, goes, what do you think about whiskey from Israel? I said, Joshua, I know Irish whiskey. I know Australian whiskey. I know, you know, Indian whiskey. But he goes, let's give it a try. Let's take it a look. So yeah, it's challenging, and I'm trying to hide my fears inside, and I'm trying to look brave, but you probably know me for a long time. So it's all game, and it's game that we need to give ourselves a chance to win.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely can relate to you saying about taking risks, considering in the last 7 years, I'm one of the people that has talked you into many dumb ideas. So makes sense.
That's funny. So what other questions do we have from other people? Let's see. Did I see Elijah Ammon? If you could unmute, please.
Hey, Sam. Right now, I'm sipping on this Pandaren single cask from, I think, last year or earlier this year. I'm curious, what are some single casks that Impex is maybe bringing in towards the end of this year or beginning of next year that you're looking forward to? I always like kind of hunting down all the Impex single cask, the nationwide cask. So I'm curious to what you're looking forward to.
Elijah, do you have this one or the 10 years old? I know that you like the Madeira 10 years old.
Yeah, this is the 10-year that.
Okay. So, you know, Pandarian whiskeys are NAS, non-age statement. And, you know, we bring the story about it made by 3 women and by very small batches, and what they do, starting with their Faraday steel unique distillation and their wood program and their Easton, et cetera, et cetera. And people get to ask, like, what age is? Well, the age is actually between 6 and 8, 9 years old, which is not very attractive. So I said, okay, I'm gonna have to bring something for people who age matters too. So I talked to Stephen Davis, who is the CEO of the company, and said, Stephen, you must have some old casks set aside. He goes, well, we were not really producing in full 10, 12, 15 years ago, but let me see what I can do. And that's how he sent me a sample of 12 years old port finished and then 10 years old Madeira finished. In both, I can look at the bottle right now. Aista, who is the master blender, she signed it by herself, by hand, and the number of bottles and the cask strength is handwritten. So it's very unique and kind of dear to us. These two got 93 and 94 points by Whiskey Advocate respective. What we have now on the way is the 15 years old bourbon cask, which is absolutely phenomenal. That's matured in the first fill sherry cask, bourbon cask from Buffalo Trace. It only, I think it's about 130 bottles out of this cask. So angels were pretty greedy.
Wow, that's
15.
incredible.
Yeah.
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 Also, Michael just showing one, which is a significant single cask. So you understand, not a lot of distillers would let independent bottlers bottle their whiskeys under their own label. Usually it would be OB, official bottling. But these guys were so happy with us after we switched from Sazerac. And we had a meeting with Chris, Joshua, myself, and the CEO of the company when we were there at the distillery. And, you know, Joshua asked, and I said, Stephen, you got to give it to him because you'll have so much of a brand exposure. And he actually allocated this cask. I think it was finished in the French wine cask, right, Michael, if I'm not mistaken?
What is it? Michael, are you there?
Good there. It was a Bordeaux Baroque cask.
Yeah, it's exceptional Penderyn cask. So we have on the way the 15 years old, and then we have another one, the 13 years old, rejuvenated, or STR, which it's probably a good thing to mention Dr. Jim Swan's name, because we're lucky to have 4 distilleries that were consulted by this fabulous person. Unfortunately passed away a few years ago. That's M&H. He actually was there in M&H 2 weeks before he passed away. And Penderyn, Kilhoman, and Golden Corrales. So STR that we bring in the 13 years old single cask is basically what Jim Swan kind of invented for those distilleries.
Very nice. So you're saying that there's a 15-year-old Penderyn. How long has Penderyn actually been in existence?
Since 1999. Their first distillation was in the beginning of 2020. So it depends on, you know, some people judge the age of the distillery by when they put the first brick and start building the walls.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them judge it by when the first distillation run took place.
Got it.
2000.
Got it. So we're at about 10 of 8 right now. Are there any other questions? There are a few people here whom I would not be able to see them raising their hands because I don't see their
Brian
pictures
has
on
one.
here. Who did? Brian?
Brian.
Oh, we let Brian have a question. He'll be on here for the introduction to the question will be 20 minutes. All right, Brian, unmute yourself.
Sam, how are you? Thank you.
Right.
I love listening to you talk about us and all of our company, and we love working for you. That's why we do what we do. It's a labor of love. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle.
Thank you.
The one question I have for you is in dealing with like people like Portishead, okay? The company of Portishead, how do you explain to people, how do you suggest the differences and build up the specialty of that? And then when they open up their distillery, whatever it's going to be, what are we going to do? What do you think we're going to do?
I know, Brian, you would come up with a question that is so difficult to answer. The relationship between us and this company is great. And, you know, we do, like Michael Nolan likes his Glenbergie. Every cask that we bring in first goes through Ollie Chilton's lips. And that's number one thing. Then it comes here, then I send it to Joshua, to Jared, to some other people. Robert would stop by and give me his opinion on that. And that's how our selection process goes. And they like it. And if something that is turned away from what Ollie liked, it's okay. He understands that. We're also working on some other projects. We just brought Black Tot from them and etc. So the relation, as this relationship develops and it becomes wider and deeper, it's going to be much difficult for me to say no to the new distillery. But I will, because one thing is we sell Porter's Cake, you know, all Isla whiskeys, and we sell Kilhoman. Another thing is, and I am doing that the first time, I never said to anyone anything. So Eric and Gil, that's for you from me. We will have to say no.
Got it. Oh, and look, and here towards the very end, one of my favorite people, Todd Coe, joins on. Right at the very end. Todd is a friend of mine. He and I host whiskey tastings for a homeless shelter that he and I support, and we host whiskey tastings there. Todd, you came on at the very end here. I'm just going to ask you, did you have any specific questions you wanted to ask Sam Filmus from Impex? Because we're in the questions and answer period, and we're just about wrapping it up.
I actually just jumped on to listen to the last bit and catch maybe the after party. I was at a different tasting call.
Yeah, that's what we're all doing here. It's amazing. Debbie, do you have any questions? No? How about Ted? Ted, do you have any questions? No? Okay. See a few other people whom I don't know, but that's all fine. Does anybody else have a question, or do we? Okay, looks good. All right, wonderful. All right. So what I'd like right now, everybody, if you could all do me a favor, and everybody unmute yourself. So everybody unmute. And if you are so inclined and you have a glass that you can pour something into, please make sure there's something in there. And I'd like us to all raise a glass and say cheers and thank you to our interviewee tonight, Sam Filmus. Say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Cheers.
And, this was wonderful, Sam. And, you know, as I said earlier tonight on my event, on my Drammers event with Michael Nolan, for Delilah's, and I've mentioned this before, that I think that when I finally am able to enter Delilah's again and have a drink there, I think I'm going to ugly cry because I won't be able to help it. It's just going to happen. I got to tell you, the same thing is going to be when we're back at World of Whiskeys at Binny's, and we have all these different events at different places, because all of us who are on here with you guys, the professionals, you know, we get a lot from you. You get a lot from us. You know, there's a lot of synergy, and you're right. It's a very social type of interaction where we get to know each other over wonderful drams. So again, thank you all very much.
I was
Appreciate
thank you, Gil and Eric, and everyone who came today. And hopefully you had a good time. I had a good time.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
That was wonderful. And